Fantastic. Well, thank you again for having me today. And as I had mentioned, I'm Daniel Locke and work with Kimberly-Clark. I'm here today to talk with you about how packaging and partnerships can form vital aspects of driving sustainability for the next decade. So before we jump in, I just want to kind of go through a little bit about who is Kimberly-Clark. So a couple of key points that we like to talk about around who we are is 1/4 of the world's population uses one of our products every day. We're also in over 175 countries, and we have been in business for almost 150 years. We have iconic brands such as Kleenex, Kotex, Scott, and Depend, and Huggies. And we also I have just over 19 billion in sales over the last quarter. So one of the key components that I would love to talk with you about is how we as a multinational company leverage global partnerships in our value chain to help drive action around sustainability. So this is a common graphic that you may have seen before by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and it's how industry looks at the single-use plastics problem. We love data in industry, right? However, when we look at this, there are some elements that are a bit concerning, right? 98% feedstock is virgin. If you think about the end of life piece, 86% is either burned, buried, or leaks out into the environment. This is not numbers that we as a company want or as industry are comfortable with. But recycling is not new to us, right? The 3 Rs have been around for many, many years and decades, reducing, reusing, recycling. However, we still haven't yet put it all together across the value chain. So one thing I'd like to make note is we have made good progress, right? Waste has come with improved production and material use efficiencies and cost savings. We've also, many of us adopted zero waste to landfill objectives and made progress against those. Kimberly-Clark is currently 96% diversion globally from our operations from landfill. And some of us have even begun to use our waste management capabilities to support our customers. However, due to the challenges end of life and post-use of these materials, the world sees the problem a bit differently than industry. Polluted by single-use plastics, right? This is not an image that makes us comfortable, but it's not one that's we haven't all seen before. And again, this is just what is on the surface. It doesn't include what potentially is more concerning around microplastics beneath the surface. So as we think about how others view this problem different than industry, the reality is we haven't effectively tackled the biggest challenge of them all: management of waste from single-use disposables at the end of life, particularly in developing and emerging economies. This is difficult on so many levels. Not one company can do and solve this alone. But fundamentally, we have to control the materials at this point. So the choice is clear. We must lead in this effort or risk becoming obsolete. So what do we need to do for that, right? Well, first, one thing is clear around governments and regulations are continuing to grow and accelerate in this space. Policymakers, as of 2003, there were only approximately 3 countries that were regulating single-use plastics. Now, more than half of the countries around the world have some form of regulation. So it is time for producers and companies like Kimberly-Clark to step up to the plate once again and tackle the waste challenge with practical and pragmatic solutions and models that make our lives and communities better. So that's why we've committed to do more. Last year, Kimberly-Clark announced our Sustainability 2030 ambition, which with our focus on advancing the well-being of 1 billion people in underserved communities around the world with the smallest environmental footprint. So what does the smallest environmental footprint mean? Well, it means we're going to reduce our environmental footprint in half in our key areas that we've deemed material to our business through materiality and other assessments, such as plastics, carbon, forest, and water. Some of you may be asking, well, what about beyond 50? What about net zero or carbon neutral. Well, we're going to continue to work to go beyond that, the 50%, and continue to strive to get there as soon as we can. But the reality is we have to get to half before we can get to zero, right? So we've got to make strides, continue to push ourselves and make progress along the way, and set goals that are also achievable where we can, and then also be ambitious where we can be a bit more aggressive. So a key theme that you'll hear throughout my presentation today is not only paying attention and addressing the environmental issues, but also keeping in mind the key social implications that exist with our decisions. And that's why the Making Lives Better piece is so critically important, is we cannot lose sight as we're trying to address environmental impacts to the social implications that also come with those. So I'll begin to touch on that a bit more in some of the later slides. So what is Kimberly-Clark also doing? Well, we're also joining Plastics Pact commitments. So you're probably not, these aren't new to you around the UK Plastics Pact, the US Pact, or the Canadian Plastics Pact. These plastic initiatives also bring groups together, whether you're CPG or an NGO or a supplier, and coming together, and most of them are centered around four common goals and objectives. One around driving recyclable, reusable, or compostable packaging materials, increasing the use of recycled content, increasing the recovery of the materials post-use, whether that be through compost or recycling systems, and eliminating unnecessary or problematic materials. So within each of these initiatives, Casey is focused on efforts to drive innovation within our supply chain. So addressing key sustainability impacts and opportunities throughout this supply chain, or value chain, as you may call it. One thing that we have to keep in mind is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So in addition to the goals that Kimberly-Clark has set forth, we have to pay attention to the SDGs that interconnect within each of the areas of the value chain, from raw materials all the way to product or packaging end of life. Our strategy addresses the largest risk and opportunities across our value chain. And we have to begin to enable the transition away from a linear economy and flow of materials to a more circular flow of materials. So what does that start with? Well, first, we have to innovate. So innovation is not something that's new to Kimberly-Clark. For nearly 150 years, Kimberly-Clark has been turning consumer insights into new-to-the-world products such as Kleenex, Kotex, and Scott. This is an image from Kimberly-Clark in 1872, and is a very early example of the circular economy. What is taking place here is we're recycling used rags, linens, to be used in newsprint and other paper products. Our history shows a focus on innovation around processes, programs, and partnerships that deliver our promise to our consumers. I'm fortunate to be in a role to help guide this future for the company. Also, our future will revolutionize the materials that we use in order to deliver benefits to people in need while being responsible. So, in addition to innovation and focusing on processes and programs, there's also components that we have to think around gathering supplier and partner insights. One thing I mentioned before is that no one company can do this alone. We have to work together and across our value chain to be successful. So Kimberly-Clark believes that strategic partnerships and stakeholder engagement are critical to unlocking new opportunities. To expedite our move to more sustainable materials and processes to address those single-use plastics, we're partnering with stakeholders across the value chain. In 2020 and 2021, we kicked off a global initiative that was cross-functional in nature. It was called a Global Request for Pricing, or RFP. You may be familiar with these initiatives, but it was very geared towards our flexible films and bag packaging. It was a cross-functional effort internally from the standpoint of we had different groups such as research and engineering, procurement, supply chain, marketing, manufacturing, etc., all engaged in the process, as well as externally with our suppliers and partners. And what we worked to identify was enable a supply and responsible sourcing of our materials to meet our goals. So leveraging our global footprint, our global supply chain, we launched this RFP in all 4 regions around the world. This is going to enable us to unlock materials that will help feed our recycled content programs, but also identify partners that we can work with directly to help us achieve our goals. As well as we know that some markets around the world may not yet be as advanced as other areas. So we may need to leverage these global partnerships to help us bridge short-term gaps while we work on creating those circular systems and infrastructure through the partnerships and programs that I mentioned before, such as the PACs and other areas, to help begin that fuel of the collection of materials, which can then be brought back into packaging and used again. So diving into a bit more of the details around our plastics footprint program, again, the reduction of the 50%, as I've mentioned before, but some of the key areas that we're focused on and driving in that global request for pricing effort and partnership is around recycled content. So 20% average recycled content in our plastic packaging by 2025, and 100% of our packaging to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable by 2025. These are also core goals that align very nicely with what we're doing within the plastics packs, but we're also working to stretch ourselves further. So in some markets, we're going beyond that 20% to 30% in order to meet needs and efforts in those areas. But we're also, through the RFP, not just limiting ourselves to recycled content. We're also trying to innovate and identify ways in which we can reduce our materials, standardize and harmonize our specifications across our supply chain, and as well as identify ways to reduce and eliminate those hard to recycle packaging materials and streamline to more recoverable, more easier recyclable materials. Now, we understand as well at KC that designing for recyclability is a step in the process, but it's not the end game. We also have to identify ways in which those materials are also collected post-use, right? So if I think about our kind of core elements within our business of the plastics footprint program, we focus on products, packaging, and circular systems. So again, it starts with the design, right? Designing with more recyclable, reusable, or renewable materials. This Andrex brand, which is out there now, our Classic Clean, has the 30% recycled packaging, but still 100% recyclable logo. We recognize that recycling of those materials is great, but it's also still challenging for our consumers. It still requires either returning to the stores with carrier bags, grocery retailers, right, the recycling at the front or back of store of those materials. It's not yet applicable in all areas when you think about curbside recycling. We need to work with our partnerships to identify ways in which we can not only encourage and incentivize consumers to want to recycle that packaging, but also increase the ease in which they can recycle that, which is why we've also recently joined CFlex, another organization focused on flexible film recovery. Additionally, our products are a key part of this. It's not just the packaging. So shifting to recycled and renewable materials within the supply chain is critical and important, as well as identifying ways in which we can reduce our use of plastic altogether or design to credible standards around biodegradability. So when we think about Huggies Special Delivery, one thing that we've done there is launched a bio-based or renewable materials, which we understand it doesn't necessarily get us all the way to the end game or recovery of those, but it is a step in the right direction. It is a carbon reduction of our materials and dependency on fossil, but also we have to continue to innovate and find ways and solutions that take us all the way through the supply chain to circular systems. In addition, around the Huggies natural and biodegradable wipes there, yes, they are plastic free and accredited to a third-party certification around biodegradability, but yet that doesn't necessarily solve all the problems that we want down the road, right? How can we enable it to get to a managed system? How can we enable a circular value chain beyond just the design of materials? These are things that we are working on as part of our 2030 program to think beyond the design of product and packaging towards circular systems. One program that we like to talk about, which is our most advanced circular program, is Right Cycle. This exists within our Kimberly-Clark professional business. It's focused on non-hazardous PPE, such as gloves, apparel, eyewear, and it's a recovery program that our customers have come to love. We have very excited partners in this space around creating recycling system for those materials that may be used in a clean room environment. They may get very little contamination or dirt on them during the use, and we can recover, reuse, and recycle them through this Right Cycle program. We're looking at ways in which we can expand this within our PPE business as well. But this is a great example of how we deploy at scale a program to recover and reuse those materials. They go into flower pots or playground equipment today through traditional means of recycling, but we're also looking at advanced and different types of recycling technologies that could take us further. How can we turn a glove back into a glove? These are things that we have to think about as a company and work with our partners to advance as we go forward. So additionally, as we think about sustainability and driving action, we can't lose sight that the environmental implications doesn't get us all the way there, right? We like to think of it as the triple way. It's environment, social, brand, right? Or economic. So right here, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the economic side and the consumer activation of that. You have to activate as a consumer brand company sustainability in a way that engages your consumers along the journey with you, such as through our Huggies Tiniest Footprint campaign, our Kleenex Every Step Counts, or our Andrex Making Our Paw Print Greener. These are examples of activations of how we bring sustainability to life through our brands to help us drive value through the consumer lens and value for our business at the same time as we're driving that environmental value. This is very key to be sustainable long term. We can't just have good for one of those three components. We have to find activations that drive value across environment, social, economic benefits to be sustainable long term. These are great examples of how we do that today across our business. Additionally, I want to talk a little bit more about the social side of that. So as we, as companies, are trying to drive our use of more recycled materials, we cannot lose sight of just trying to get our hands on any and all recycled materials and calling it a win. So that's why we've partnered with a group called iWork, or the Integrated Waste Recycling Consortium. What iWork is doing is they're transforming the way in which we are looking at recovering materials in this space. They are working with communities in developing and emerging markets, such as in Brazil, on enhancing human dignity, making sure there are proper labor, human rights components into the workforce. Are they safe at work? Are they getting fair wages? These are very important elements that need to be taken into account when we're thinking about socially responsible sourcing of our materials throughout our value chain. Again, as we as companies try to advance our materials that we're using, we have to think about not just environmental implications and the brand implications, but also those social implications that come along with that. So iWork is a great example of how we're doing that. It's active in Brazil today, but we're also beginning to expand that through one of our other partnerships of the Trash Free Seas Alliance Signature Initiative through Colombia and Vietnam. So again, working in these developing and emerging economies and the informal waste picker networks to begin to identify ways to socially resource those materials in a responsible way, so that way we can feel comfortable about using them back into our business and supply chain. This is an important element that I ask folks to consider as they go forward in trying to advance their recycling programs. So what do we want our future to be? This is a question we have to ask ourselves. This is an image of a waste picker, like I was just mentioning on the slide before. As you can see, there's mounds of trash that they're picking through, trying to make a living of what they gather. There's also the health, hygiene, social implications that come with this line of work. So what do we as stakeholders want our future to be? If we do not work together to solve solutions, innovate, partner across our value chain, we'll continue to see those statistics that I showed earlier in that graph by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We want to continue to make progress, but we have to think in different ways and partner in new ways to be successful. Additionally, Kimberly-Clark wants to lead, right? We are committed to lead. This image of this girl sitting on this park bench, you may say, well, this is just an ordinary park bench. Well, wrong. It's actually coming from recycled materials through a program called Red Cycle, which was activated in Australia. And that is collecting flexible films and packaging materials and recycling them into park benches, playground equipment, etc. It's finding a home for them so you don't have to use virgin materials and pulling from other precious resources. This is an example of how we can recycle and find value in our programs, but also we need to be committed to lead in this space, driving action, working across the aisle and finding partnerships with our peers. Again, I can't state it enough. Partnerships are so critical to be successful within our programs. And last but not least, earlier, our company launched a new corporate purpose in alignment with our sustainability strategy and vision around better care for a better world. So we have to think about this now and for future generations to come. You know, if I take this to a personal front, I'm actually just coming back from paternity leave. I had a boy on August 10th, so it's not that long ago. And it challenges us to think in different ways when we come to work. What is our why? That's a question I'll ask everybody to think about. What is your why? Why are you coming to work every day? And why are you doing what you're doing? Is it focusing on better care for a better world? Are we going to leave this world in a better place than it was when we had it and we got to enjoy it? This is a question that I ask myself all the time, and why I'm so excited about the work that we're doing at Kimberly-Clark, but also about the partnerships that we can form in our value chain, so that way we can take us further. To get there, we have to work together. So I ask everybody to find opportunities and ask yourself, what is your why? To identify ways to drive better care for a better world. So with that, thank you for your time today. Very much appreciated. And I'll turn it back over to the host for any questions.